When the Zephyrian Empire sent their desperate plea across the galaxy, they expected the mighty Galactic Federation to respond with their legendary peacekeeping fleet. They expected diplomacy, negotiations, and the slow grinding wheels of intergalactic politics. What they got instead was humanity, the same species the galaxy had dismissed as primitive newcomers just 50 years ago. The ones who built ships out of scrap metal and held their fleets together with something they called duct tape. The ones who laughed in the face of impossible odds and somehow kept winning battles they should have lost. The Zephyrians were about to learn why every veteran commander in the galaxy had the same advice about humans: never underestimate them. And if they're coming to help you, get out of their way. This is the story of how humanity's ragtag fleet arrived first to answer a call for help and changed the course of galactic history forever. Because sometimes, the best help doesn't come from the most powerful. It comes from the most determined. The emergency beacon cut through the cosmic static like a knife through silence. Deep in the communications hub of Earth's Luna Station, operator Sarah Chun nearly dropped her coffee as the priority alert flashed across every screen in the facility. The automated systems had already begun their analysis. Origin point: Zephyrian space, approximately 47 light-years from Sol. Classification: planetary distress, maximum priority. Director Martinez to communications immediately. Sarah's voice echoed through the corridors of Luna Station. Within minutes, Director Carlos Martinez stood behind her console, his weathered face reflecting the harsh blue glow of the emergency displays. "What do we have, Chun?" Martinez asked, his voice carrying the weight of someone who had seen too many crises in his 30-year career with Earth's Deep Space Communications Division. Sarah's fingers danced across her console, bringing up the translated message. The Universal Translator had worked overtime to convert the desperate Zephyrian plea into readable text. "It's bad, sir. The Kronak Imperium has invaded Zephyr Prime. Their planetary defenses have failed, and civilian evacuation is incomplete. They're requesting immediate military assistance from the Galactic Federation." Martinez frowned as he read the full transmission. The Zephyrians were one of the galaxy's oldest civilizations. Their crystal-based technology and peaceful philosophy had earned them respect across countless star systems. The fact that they were calling for military help spoke volumes about their desperation. The Kronak Imperium was known throughout the galaxy as a ruthless expansionist force, treating conquered worlds as nothing more than resource extraction sites. "Timestamp on this transmission?" Martinez asked. "Sent 14 hours ago, sir. But given the distance and relay delays, they probably sent this almost 18 hours ago." The director's expression darkened. In space warfare, 18 hours could mean the difference between evacuation and extinction. He activated his personal communicator and connected directly to Admiral Rebecca Stone aboard the flagship of humanity's 3rd Expeditionary Fleet, currently on patrol near the outer rim of human space. "Admiral Stone, we have a priority situation. I'm transmitting the details now. 300,000 kilometers away, aboard the human dreadnought Indomitable." Admiral Stone reviewed the intelligence package with the calm efficiency that had earned her command of humanity's most advanced fleet. At 52, she carried herself with the quiet confidence of someone who had led humanity through 3 major conflicts in the past decade. Her steel-gray hair was pulled back in a regulation bun, and her dark eyes held the sharp intelligence that had made her the youngest admiral in human Space Force history. "Communications, get me a direct line to Galactic Federation Command on Altair Prime," she ordered her communications officer. Lieutenant Commander James Park, a young officer with barely 5 years of deep space experience, worked his console with practiced efficiency. "Channel open, Admiral. Federation Command is standing by." The holographic display shimmered to life, revealing the blue-skinned visage of Fleet Marshal Thexon, the Altarian officer who commanded the Federation's rapid response forces. His elongated features carried the typical Altarian expression of calm superiority that humans had learned to interpret as barely concealed condescension. "Admiral Stone." Thexon's voice carried across space with crystal clarity. "I assume you are calling regarding the Zephyrian situation. I must inform you that Federation protocols require a full Senate approval for any military intervention. The earliest we can mobilize a peacekeeping force would be 6 standard days. Stone felt her jaw tighten. 6 days was a death sentence for the Zephyrian civilians. Marshal, with respect, 6 days is too long. The Kronak forces will have completed their occupation and begun resource extraction. Civilian casualties will be catastrophic. The Altarian's expression remained unchanged. Admiral, I understand human impatience with proper procedures. However, the Federation has protocols that have maintained galactic peace for over 2 millennia. We cannot simply rush military forces into sovereign territory without proper authorization, even when that territory is requesting help. Especially then, the situation requires careful diplomatic consideration. Perhaps economic sanctions would be more appropriate than military action. Stone closed her eyes for a moment, fighting back the response she really wanted to give. When she opened them, her voice was steady but carried an edge that made her bridge crew pay attention. Marshal, I respectfully withdraw my request for Federation coordination. Humanity will respond independently to this distress call. The Altarian's expression shifted to something approaching alarm. Admiral, I must strongly advise against unilateral action. The Kronak Imperium fields a significant military force. Your fleet, while enthusiastic, lacks the numbers for a successful engagement. Thank you for your concern, Marshal. Stone out. The hologram dissolved, leaving the bridge of the indomitable intense silence. Stone turned to her navigation officer, Commander Lisa Torres, a veteran of the Centauri border war who had served with distinction for 15 years. Torres, plot a course for the Zephyr system. Maximum sustainable speed for the entire fleet. Aye, Admiral. Course plotted. At maximum burn, we can reach Zephyr Prime in 38 hours. Stone nodded and activated the fleet-wide communication system. Throughout the 3rd Expeditionary Fleet, her voice echoed in the corridors of 12 ships, the Dreadnought Indomitable, 5 heavy cruisers for destroyers, and 2 specialized support vessels. Nearly 8,000 human military personnel received the same message simultaneously. This is Admiral Stone. We have received a distress call from the Zephyrian civilization. They are under attack by the Kronak Imperium, and their civilian population is in immediate danger. The Galactic Federation has chosen to respond through diplomatic channels. We have chosen a different path. She paused, knowing that her next words would be transmitted across human space and eventually reach the halls of power on Earth. We are not the largest fleet in the galaxy. We are not the most advanced. But we are here, we are ready, and we will not abandon civilians to die while bureaucrats debate protocols. All ships, prepare for maximum burn to the Zephyr system. We launch in 1 hour. The response was immediate. Across 12 ships, human crews began the complex preparation for deep space combat operations. In the engineering sections, fusion reactors hummed with increasing power as engineers pushed the limits of safe operation. Weapons officers ran final diagnostics on railguns, plasma cannons, and the new prototype quantum torpedoes that had been installed just 6 months earlier. Medical bays prepared for combat casualties, while logistics officers confirmed ammunition and supply levels. Aboard the heavy cruiser Defiant, Captain Marcus Webb received the tactical briefing with grim determination. His ship had seen action in every major human conflict for the past decade, and his crew of 600 had developed the kind of unit cohesion that only came from shared danger. Webb's scarred face told the story of his 15 years in space combat, including a boarding action that had left him with a distinctive scar running from his left temple to his jawline. XO, what's our intelligence on Kronak military capabilities? Webb asked his executive officer, Commander Sarah Kim. Kim consulted her tactical display, bringing up the latest intelligence files on Kronak technology and tactics. Standard heavy assault doctrine, sir. They prefer overwhelming firepower and mass formations. Their ships are heavily armored but relatively slow. Individual crew quality is poor, but they make up for it with numbers and brutal tactics. Estimated fleet strength at Zephyr Prime? Intelligence suggests 3 heavy battleships, 8 cruisers, and approximately 15 smaller vessels. Total estimated crew of 40,000. Webb whistled low. The human fleet was outnumbered nearly 3 to 1, with the Kronak force holding significant advantages in heavy weaponry. Well, we've faced worse odds before. Sir, Commander Kim looked puzzled. The Proxima Siege. We held off a Keltharian assault fleet of 30 ships with just 4 human vessels. Of course, we had planetary defense systems helping us then, but this time will be the attackers, sir. Webb grinned, the expression transforming his scarred features. Even better. Nothing like a good challenge to keep life interesting. Throughout the fleet, similar conversations were taking place as human commanders assessed the tactical situation and prepared their crews for what would likely be their most challenging engagement yet. The humans had earned a reputation throughout the galaxy for their tactical flexibility and stubborn refusal to accept defeat, but they had never faced odds quite like this. On the bridge of the destroyer Swift, Captain Elena Rodriguez reviewed the enemy disposition with her tactical officer. Her ship was one of the newest in the human fleet, incorporating lessons learned from previous conflicts and equipped with the latest in human military technology. The Kronak prefer close-range engagements, her tactical officer, Lieutenant Mark Thompson, reported. Their energy weapons lose effectiveness at long range, but their armor is nearly impenetrable at close quarters. Then, we don't fight close, Rodriguez replied simply. Human doctrine emphasizes speed and maneuverability. We stay at range, use our superior targeting systems, and make them come to us. Ma'am, what about the civilian evacuation? Our primary mission is protecting the Zephyrian population. Rodriguez nodded. Thompson, you raised the key point. This isn't about defeating the Kronak fleet. It's about buying time for civilian evacuation. Every minute we can keep their attention focused on us is another minute for non-combatants to reach safety. Back aboard the Indomitable, Admiral Stone stood before the main tactical display, studying the projected battle space around Zephyr Prime. Her staff officers had worked for the past hour to develop contingency plans for every scenario they could imagine. The Zephyrian system consisted of 4 planets, with Zephyr Prime being the 3rd planet from their star. The planet supported a population of nearly 2 billion Zephyrians, mostly concentrated in 12 major crystal cities that served as centers of their civilization. Admiral, her intelligence officer, Commander Patricia Hayes, approached with the latest analysis. Kronak forces appear to be focusing on the largest population centers. Their standard occupation doctrine involves immediate control of communication and transportation infrastructure, followed by systematic resource extraction. Civilian casualties? Unknown, but Kronak history suggests they view civilian populations as expendable. Stone felt a cold anger building in her chest. Throughout her career, she had seen the aftermath of Kronak occupations. The Empire treated conquered worlds as nothing more than mines to be stripped bare, and civilian populations as labor to be exploited until death. The galaxy's major powers often ignored Kronak aggression because it typically targeted smaller, less influential civilizations. Time to fleet readiness. All ships report ready for departure in 23 minutes, Admiral. Stone activated her personal communicator and opened a channel to her daughter aboard the cruiser Vigilant. Lieutenant Commander Rebecca Stone Jr. had followed her mother into military service and had earned her position through merit rather than family connections. At 28, she had already demonstrated the tactical acumen and leadership ability that marked her as a future fleet commander. Rebecca, how's your ship's readiness? Vigilant is ready for departure, Admiral. Crew is eager to get moving. Stone smiled slightly. Her daughter had inherited the family trait of impatience with unnecessary delays. Remember, this is likely to be our toughest engagement yet. The Kronak outnumber us significantly. Understood, Mother. I mean, Admiral. Rebecca. Stone's voice softened momentarily. Be careful out there. Always am. See you on the other side. As the final minutes counted down to departure, Stone reflected on the path that had brought humanity to this moment. 50 years ago, humans had been newly arrived participants in galactic civilization, viewed with a mixture of curiosity and condescension by the established powers. Human technology was considered primitive, human tactics unsophisticated, and human philosophy too aggressive for civilized society. But humans had proven surprisingly adaptable to galactic civilization, and Their military forces had earned grudging respect through a series of defensive actions against various threats. The human approach to warfare emphasized individual initiative, tactical flexibility, and a stubborn refusal to accept defeat that had proven effective against more technologically advanced opponents. Now, facing their greatest challenge yet, Stone wondered if those qualities would be enough. The Kronak Imperium was a different kind of enemy, not seeking conquest for ideological reasons, but driven by pure predatory instinct to consume and destroy. They had crushed dozens of civilizations over the past century, and the galaxy's major powers had learned to look the other way rather than confront such naked aggression. All ships report ready for departure, Admiral, her communications officer announced. Stone straightened her uniform and prepared to give the order that would launch humanity into its most dangerous mission yet. Around her, the bridge crew waited with the calm professionalism that had made the human fleet a respected force throughout known space. Fleet command to all ships, she announced. Course is laid in for Zephyr Prime. All ships, execute departure sequence. Across the formation, 12 human warships engaged their main drives and began the acceleration toward what would become known as one of the most decisive battles in galactic history. The human fleet cut through space like a school of predatory fish, their formation tight and disciplined despite the enormous distances involved. 36 hours into their journey towards Zephyr Prime, the ships maintained perfect coordination even while traveling at speeds that pushed the limits of their drive systems. The familiar blue glow of fusion drives painted the darkness behind each vessel, leaving trails of light that would fade long before any observer could detect them. Admiral Stone stood in the observation deck of the Indomitable, watching the stars whirl slowly past as the fleet maintained its heading. The ship's artificial gravity kept her feet firmly planted on the deck, but the subtle vibration of the main drive reminded her constantly of the enormous forces involved in pushing 8,000 human personnel and their equipment across interstellar space in less than 2 days. Admiral, her aide, Lieutenant Jennifer Park, approached with a data tablet. Intelligence has received updated information about the situation at Zephyr Prime. Stone accepted the tablet and reviewed the latest reports. The news was not encouraging. Long-range sensors from automated monitoring stations had detected massive energy signatures around Zephyr Prime, indicating that the Kronak forces had not only maintained their occupation but had begun systematic bombardment of major population centers. Thermal imaging suggested that 3 of the 12 crystal cities were already showing signs of damage, with refugee streams flowing outward from the urban centers toward more remote areas of the planet. Estimated civilian casualties? Stone asked. Unknown, but the displacement patterns suggest that approximately 30% of the population has been forced to evacuate their homes. The Kronak appear to be using their standard intimidation tactics, targeted strikes against symbolic targets to encourage compliance. Stone felt her jaw tighten. Kronak intimidation tactics were notorious throughout the galaxy for their brutality. The Empire preferred to conquer through terror rather than prolonged warfare, using overwhelming force against civilian targets to break the will of defending forces. It was an effective strategy against most civilizations, but it also meant that every hour of delay cost innocent lives. Any updates from the Galactic Federation? Lieutenant Park consulted her tablet again. Federation Command has issued a formal protest to the Kronak Imperium and called for an emergency session of the Galactic Senate. The earliest possible military response is still estimated at 4 standard days. 4 days too late, Stone muttered. She activated her communicator and opened a channel to her senior commanders. All ship captains, this is Admiral Stone. Report to the Indomitable for tactical briefing in 1 hour. Within the hour, the holographic communication system aboard the Indomitable flickered to life, displaying the faces of 11 ship captains scattered throughout the human fleet. Each captain brought decades of experience and unique perspectives to the tactical challenges ahead, and Stone had learned to value their input in developing battle plans. Captain Webb of the Defiant spoke first, his scarred face serious as he reviewed the latest intelligence. Admiral, the Kronak formation appears to be standard siege deployment. 3 heavy battleships maintaining high orbit, with cruisers and smaller vessels conducting surface bombardment operations. Their defensive positioning assumes any approaching fleet will attempt direct assault, which is exactly what they'd expect from a Federation response, added Captain Rodriguez from the Swift. Federation doctrine emphasizes overwhelming force applied directly. The Kronak have probably positioned themselves to counter that approach. Stone nodded. What alternatives do we have? Captain Jennifer Liu of the cruiser Redemption, a veteran of the Vega incident who had earned her command through exceptional tactical innovation, brought up a three-dimensional display of the Zephyr system. The system has two asteroid belts, Admiral, one between the second and third planets, another beyond the fourth planet. If we approach through the outer belt, we could mask our sensor signatures until we're within striking range. The outer belt approach would add 6 hours to our arrival time, observed Captain David Chun of the destroyer Relentless. Every hour gives the Kronak more time to consolidate their position. True, Stone agreed. But it also gives us the element of surprise. Opinions. The discussion continued for another 30 minutes, with each captain contributing their analysis of the tactical situation. The human approach to military planning emphasized collaborative input from all levels of command, a philosophy that often surprised other galactic civilizations accustomed to more rigid hierarchical structures. Captain Rodriguez raised a critical point. Admiral, we need to consider our primary objective. Are we attempting to drive off the Kronak fleet, or are we focused on protecting civilian evacuation? Our primary mission is civilian protection, Stone replied without hesitation. If we can accomplish that by driving off the Kronak fleet, excellent. If we need to sacrifice our ships to buy time for evacuation, that's what we'll do. The captains nodded grimly. Each had signed up for military service knowing that duty might require the ultimate sacrifice, but the reality of facing those odds still required mental preparation. Captain Webb leaned forward in his holographic projection. Admiral, I have a suggestion. My ship has the heaviest armor and the most experienced crew for close-quarters combat. If we need a distraction to draw Kronak attention while lighter ships evacuate civilians, the Defiant should take point. Noted, Marcus, but let's develop a plan that gets everyone home alive. As the briefing concluded, Stone found herself reflecting on the unique challenges of human leadership in galactic civilization. Human military doctrine had evolved from centuries of terrestrial warfare, emphasizing adaptability, individual initiative, and the willingness to accept casualties in pursuit of strategic objectives. Those characteristics had served humanity well in their first few decades of interstellar conflict. But they also meant that human commanders often found themselves taking risks that other species considered unacceptable. In her private quarters later that evening, Stone reviewed personal messages from her family on Earth. Her husband, a civilian engineer working on Mars colony, had sent a brief note expressing confidence in her abilities and reminding her to be careful. Her younger son, still finishing his education at the Solar Naval Academy, had included a tactical analysis of Kronak weapons systems that showed impressive understanding for someone with no combat experience. The most meaningful message came from her father, retired Admiral Thomas Stone, who had commanded Earth's defenses during the first major contact with hostile alien forces 30 years earlier. His brief note read simply, Rebecca, remember that courage is not the absence of fear, but action despite fear. Trust your training, trust your people, and remember that humanity's greatest strength has always been our refusal to abandon those in need. Make them proud. Meanwhile, throughout the fleet, 8,000 human personnel prepared for what many understood might be their final mission. In the engineering sections of each ship, technicians pushed reactor systems to their absolute limits, extracting every possible erg of power from fusion plants designed for sustainable operation. The engineers knew they were operating beyond safe parameters, but they also knew that speed could mean the difference between arriving in time to save lives or arriving to find only empty ruins. Aboard the cruiser Vigilant, Lieutenant Commander Rebecca Stone Jr. conducted a final inspection of her ship's weapons systems. The Vigilant mounted 8 heavy rail guns, 6 plasma cannon turrets, and 2 of the new quantum torpedo launchers that represented the cutting edge of human weapons technology. Each system had been tested and retested over the past 36 hours, with every component verified for optimal performance. Ma'am. Her weapons officer, Lieutenant Commander Sarah Martinez, approached with a status report. All weapons systems show green across the board. Ammunition storage is at maximum capacity, including the full load of quantum torpedoes. Rebecca reviewed the tactical display showing her ship's position within the fleet formation. As one of the newer cruisers, Vigilant carried more advanced sensor systems than many of the older vessels, making her particularly valuable for target acquisition and fire control in the coming battle. Martinez, what's your assessment of our chances against Kronak heavy armor? Honestly, ma'am, their battleships are tough targets. Our railguns can penetrate their hull armor, but we'll need sustained fire to cause significant damage. The plasma cannons are more effective against their smaller vessels. The quantum torpedoes are our best bet against their heavy units, but we only have 6 shots. Rebecca nodded thoughtfully. Quantum torpedoes represented a breakthrough in human weapons technology, using controlled quantum field collapse to bypass conventional energy shields and armor. Early tests had shown devastating effectiveness against heavily armored targets, but the weapons had never been used in actual combat conditions against an enemy like the Kronak Empire. What about their return fire capability? Kronak energy weapons are powerful, but relatively short-ranged. If we can maintain distance and use our superior maneuverability, we should be able to avoid the worst of their firepower. The real danger comes if they close to optimal range for their main batteries. In the Destroyer Swift's ready room, Captain Rodriguez addressed her senior officers about the challenges they would face in the coming engagement. Her ship was the newest and fastest in the human fleet, capable of acceleration and maneuverability that exceeded anything previously achieved by human shipbuilders. Ladies and gentlemen, Rodriguez began, we're about to face an enemy that has conquered dozens of star systems through superior firepower and ruthless tactics. They expect their opponents to meet them head-on with conventional formations and predictable strategies. Her tactical officer, Lieutenant Thompson, raised his hand. Captain, what makes us think our approach will be more effective? Because we're not fighting their kind of war, Rodriguez replied. Kronak tactics are based on intimidation and overwhelming force. They're not prepared for an enemy that refuses to be intimidated and uses unconventional methods. Our job is to be unpredictable, stay mobile, and hit them where they're not expecting it. The discussion continued as Rodriguez outlined her ship's role in the coming battle. The Swift would serve as a forward scout, using her advanced sensors to identify target priorities and her superior speed to conduct hit and run attacks against isolated Kronak vessels. It was a dangerous assignment that would place her ship at the forefront of the engagement, but Rodriguez and her crew had volunteered for exactly these kinds of high-risk missions. As the fleet continued its approach towards Zephyr Prime, automated systems throughout each ship conducted final preparation sequences. Medical bays prepared for combat casualties, with surgical robots calibrated and medical supplies inventoried. Life support systems were checked and double-checked, with emergency backup systems brought online. Damage control teams reviewed emergency procedures and verified the location of critical repair equipment. In the Indomitable's Communications Center, technicians worked to establish contact with any surviving Zephyrian forces. The planet's communication network appeared to be partially operational, but Kronak jamming made clear communication difficult. Scattered fragments of transmissions suggested that significant portions of the Zephyrian population had successfully evacuated to remote areas, but organized resistance was limited. Admiral, Communications Officer Park reported, we're receiving intermittent signals from what appears to be a Zephyrian military commander. The signals are heavily encrypted and partially jammed, but our computers have managed to decode portions of the transmissions. Stone reviewed the partial translation on her personal display. The Zephyrian commander, identified as Defense Coordinator Veltar, was apparently directing civilian evacuation efforts while attempting to coordinate resistance against the Kronak occupation forces. His messages indicated that approximately 60% of the civilian population had been successfully evacuated from the primary target areas, but that Kronak forces were systematically destroying evacuation routes and refugee gathering points. Can we establish two-way communication? Possibly, Admiral, but Any transmission strong enough to reach the planet's surface would also reveal our presence to the Kronak fleet. They're undoubtedly monitoring all communication frequencies. Stone considered the tactical implications. Maintaining surprise was essential to their battle plan, but coordination with surviving Zephyrian forces could provide crucial intelligence about Kronak positions and civilian evacuation status. After a moment of thought, she made her decision. Prepare a tight beam transmission to the Zephyrian coordinator. Inform him that human military forces are en route and will arrive in approximately 6 hours. Request current status on civilian evacuation and any intelligence about Kronak force disposition. The message was transmitted using a focused communication beam that would be difficult for the Kronak forces to intercept, but would clearly indicate to the Zephyrian defenders that help was on the way. For Admiral Stone, the decision represented a calculated risk, revealing their approach in exchange for potentially crucial intelligence about the situation on the ground. 20 minutes later, the response arrived. Defense Coordinator Veltar's message was brief but informative. Civilian evacuation was 75% complete, with the remaining population concentrated in 3 remote canyon complexes that offered natural protection against orbital bombardment. Kronak ground forces were conducting systematic searches for evacuation sites, while their fleet maintained standard siege deployment with regular bombardment of abandoned population centers. Most importantly, Veltar reported that Kronak Command apparently believed that no military response would arrive for several days, based on their knowledge of Galactic Federation procedures. The enemy fleet was positioned for siege operations rather than defense against approaching forces, suggesting that the human fleet might achieve complete tactical surprise. As the final hours of their journey elapsed, Admiral Stone found herself standing again in the observation deck, watching the target star grow slowly brighter against the cosmic background. Somewhere ahead lay Zephyr Prime and its 2 billion inhabitants, depending on 12 human warships to accomplish what the entire Galactic Federation had been unwilling to attempt. The weight of responsibility pressed down on her shoulders like a physical force, but Stone also felt the familiar surge of determination that had carried her through every major challenge of her career. In 6 hours, the human fleet would drop out of hyperspace at the edge of the Zephyr system and discover whether their bold plan could succeed against impossible odds. Behind her, the bridge crew continued their final preparations with calm professionalism, trusting in their admiral's leadership and their own training to see them through the coming storm. Throughout the fleet, 8,000 humans prepared to face their greatest test yet, knowing that the survival of an entire civilization depended on their willingness to fight against overwhelming odds. The stars continued their eternal dance, indifferent to the drama about to unfold, while 12 human warships raced through the void toward their appointment with destiny. The human fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Zephyr system like ghosts materializing from the void. 12 warships shed their faster-than-light velocity in perfect synchronization, their drives switching from hyperspace configuration to normal space operation with practiced efficiency. The transition was flawless, a testament to the countless hours of training that had drilled these procedures into muscle memory for every crew member. Admiral Stone stood on the bridge of the Indomitable, studying the tactical display as sensor data flooded in from across the system. What she saw confirmed her worst fears and validated her decision to respond immediately. The Kronak fleet had positioned themselves in high orbit around Zephyr Prime exactly as predicted, but the devastation visible on the planet's surface exceeded even the most pessimistic intelligence estimates. Sensor report, Stone ordered crisply. Commander Hayes, the fleet intelligence officer, consulted her displays with grim efficiency. Admiral, I'm reading 3 Kronak heavy battleships in high orbit, designated Alpha, Beta, and Gamma. 8 cruisers conducting bombardment operations. 15 smaller vessels, appears to be destroyers, and support craft. Total estimated enemy strength, 41,000 personnel. Stone absorbed the numbers without flinching. The human fleet was outnumbered more than 5 to 1, facing an enemy force that held every apparent advantage except surprise. What about the planet? Thermal imaging shows extensive damage to 7 of the 12 major population centers. 3 cities appear to have been completely destroyed. Energy signatures indicate systematic bombardment has been ongoing for approximately 36 hours. The bridge fell silent as the implications sank in. 3 entire cities destroyed meant potentially 300 million civilian casualties, a scale of destruction that was almost impossible to comprehend. Stone felt a cold fury building in her chest, the kind of controlled rage that had driven human military forces to impossible victories throughout their history. Any signs that our approach has been detected? Negative, Admiral. The Kronak fleet maintains siege formation. No indication of alert status or defensive positioning. Stone activated the fleet communication system, opening a channel to all 12 ships simultaneously. All vessels, this is Admiral Stone. Sensor data confirms enemy disposition as briefed. Kronak forces appear unaware of our presence. We have one opportunity to achieve tactical surprise. Let's make it count. She paused, looking around at her bridge crew before continuing. Remember, our primary mission is civilian protection. Every minute we keep the Kronak fleet engaged is another minute for evacuation operations. All ships, execute Battle Plan Alpha. Weapons free in 5 minutes. Throughout the human fleet, crews responded with the calm professionalism that marked veteran space forces. Aboard the heavy cruiser Defiant, Captain Webb reviewed his ship's target assignments while his weapons officer prepared the main battery for combat. The Defiant carried 12 heavy railguns capable of penetrating battleship armor at optimal range, plus defensive systems that had been upgraded after lessons learned in previous engagements. Target priority is the Kronak battleship designated Beta, Webb announced to his crew over the ship's communication system. Intelligence indicates it's the command vessel for their bombardment operations. If we can disable their flagship, it might disrupt their coordination long enough for civilian evacuation to be completed. In the destroyer Swift's engine room, Chief Engineer Maria Santos pushed her fusion reactors to maximum output while monitoring dozens of critical systems. Her ship needed every erg of available power for the high-speed attack runs that would characterize the opening phase of the battle. The Swift's role was to conduct lightning strikes against isolated Kronak vessels, using superior speed to avoid return fire while inflicting maximum damage. Reactor output at 112% of rated capacity, Santos reported to Captain Rodriguez on the bridge. We can maintain this level for approximately 40 minutes before risking cascade failure. Understood, Chief. Let's hope 40 minutes is enough. Aboard the Indomitable, Admiral Stone made final adjustments to the battle plan based on real-time sensor data. The Kronak fleet's positioning was even more favorable than expected. Their battleships were spread across a wide orbital arc, making mutual support difficult. Their smaller vessels were scattered throughout the system, conducting bombardment operations, leaving them vulnerable to concentrated attack by the more maneuverable human forces. Communications, any update from the Zephyrian forces? Lieutenant Park consulted her display. Defense Coordinator Veltar reports that evacuation operations are 86% complete. Remaining civilians are concentrated in 3 locations that offer natural protection from orbital bombardment. He estimates 6 hours needed for complete evacuation if bombardment can be stopped. 6 hours. Stone felt the weight of that timeline settle on her shoulders. The human fleet would need to hold off a superior Kronak force for 6 hours while protecting civilian evacuation routes. In space combat, 6 hours was an eternity. Most engagements were decided within the first 30 minutes. Fleet positions? She asked her navigation officer. Commander Torres consulted her tactical display. All ships in position for initial attack run. Distance to primary targets, 800,000 kilometers, and closing. Time to optimal firing range, 14 minutes, Admiral. Stone nodded and activated her personal communicator to address her daughter aboard the cruiser Vigilant. Rebecca, status report. Vigilant ready for combat operations, Admiral. All weapons systems optimal, crew prepared for engagement. Remember, stick to the plan. Hit and run attacks, maximum damage with minimum exposure. Don't try to be a hero. Understood, Admiral. See you on the other side. As the fleet approached optimal firing range, Stone found herself reflecting on the path that had brought humanity to this moment. 50 years of gradual integration into galactic civilization, building relationships, and earning respect through demonstrated competence rather than raw power. The human approach to diplomacy emphasized actions over words, a philosophy that had sometimes frustrated their more verbally oriented alien allies but had also established humanity's reputation for reliability. Now that reputation was being tested in the most extreme way possible. The Galactic Federation's unwillingness to respond quickly to the Zephyrian crisis had left humanity as the only hope for 2 billion civilians facing extinction. The irony was not lost on Stone. The species that the galaxy had initially dismissed as too primitive and aggressive had become the defenders of galactic civilization's highest ideals. Optimal firing range in 60 seconds, announced the weapons officer. Stone took a deep breath and prepared to give the order that would begin the most challenging battle in human history. Around her, the bridge crew waited with professional calm, trusting in their training and their admiral's leadership. Throughout the fleet, 8,000 humans prepared to fight against overwhelming odds for people they had never met, driven by the simple human conviction that those in need of protection deserved to receive it. All ships, this is Admiral Stone. Commence attack. The space around Zephyr Prime suddenly erupted in brilliant flashes of energy as 12 human warships opened fire simultaneously. Railgun projectiles accelerated to significant fractions of light speed created brilliant streaks across the darkness, while plasma cannon bursts painted the void in shades of blue and white. The coordinated attack struck the Kronak fleet with devastating precision, targeting critical systems and command nodes with surgical accuracy. The Kronak battleship Beta, serving as the bombardment force's command center, took the brunt of the initial assault. Heavy railgun rounds from the Defiant and 2 other cruisers punched through its armor plating, sending massive chunks of metal spinning into space. Secondary explosions rippled along the battleship's hull as internal systems overloaded, and its main communication array disintegrated under concentrated plasma fire. But the Kronak response was swift and brutal. The massive battleships turned their main batteries toward the approaching human fleet, unleashing torrents of energy that turned space itself into a killing field. Kronak energy weapons lacked the precision of human railguns, but their raw power was staggering. Each shot carried enough energy to vaporize a city block. The destroyer Relentless, conducting a high-speed attack run against one of the Kronak cruisers, found herself caught in a crossfire between 2 enemy vessels. Captain Chun ordered emergency evasive maneuvers, but the ship's superior speed couldn't quite compensate for the volume of incoming fire. A Kronak energy blast caught the destroyer's port side, tearing through armor plating and causing massive damage to the ship's main drive system. Damage control teams to sections 4 through 7. Chun ordered over the ship's communication system. Engineering, I need engine status immediately. Port drive completely offline, Captain, his chief engineer reported. Starboard drive operating at 60% capacity. We can maintain maneuverability, but maximum speed is reduced by 40%. The loss of speed was potentially fatal for a destroyer whose survival depended on superior maneuverability. Chun found himself faced with a choice between withdrawing his damaged ship from combat or continuing the attack despite reduced capability. The decision took him less than a second. Weapons officer, concentrate all fire on that cruiser's main drive section. If we can't run, we'll make sure they can't chase us. The Relentless poured everything she had into the enemy cruiser, her remaining weapons systems cycling at maximum rate of fire. Railgun rounds and plasma bursts converged on the Kronak vessel's engine section, causing a series of catastrophic explosions that left the enemy ship drifting powerless in space. Meanwhile, Admiral Stone watched the overall tactical situation develop on her command display. The initial assault had achieved better results than expected. 2 Kronak cruisers were disabled, and the enemy battleship Beta was severely damaged. But the Kronak fleet was adapting quickly, their remaining vessels moving to concentrate their firepower against the attacking human forces. Communications, get me damage reports from all ships. The responses came in quickly, painting a picture of heavy combat, but manageable casualties. The Relentless was severely damaged but still combat effective. 2 other ships reported minor damage from glancing hits. Most importantly, the human fleet's superior speed and maneuverability were allowing them to avoid the worst of the Kronak return fire. "Admiral," her tactical officer reported urgently. "Kronak forces are repositioning. It looks like they're trying to concentrate their battleships for a coordinated assault." Stone studied the enemy formation changes. The three massive Kronak battleships were indeed moving to support each other, their combined firepower enough to overwhelm any human vessel caught in their kill zone. But the repositioning also created opportunities. The enemy cruisers conducting bombardment operations were now isolated from their heavy support. "Signal all ships. Execute Battle Plan Bravo. Concentrate on the isolated cruisers while avoiding the battleship formation." The human fleet split into 3 attack groups, each targeting a different sector of the Kronak formation. The cruiser Vigilant led one group against a pair of enemy cruisers near the planet's north pole, while the Defiant spearheaded an assault on 3 cruisers conducting bombardment operations over the planet's main continent. Lieutenant Commander Rebecca Stone Jr. found herself in command of her attack group as they closed with their targets. Her ship's advanced sensor systems gave her a clear picture of enemy positions and movements, allowing her to coordinate the attack with precision that would have impressed even veteran fleet commanders. Vigilant to Hunter and Falcon, she transmitted to the 2 destroyers in her formation. "Target the lead cruiser's weapon systems. We'll focus on their drives and command sections." The coordinated assault was devastating. Human railguns and plasma cannons found their marks with mechanical precision, while the enemy cruisers struggled to target the fast-moving human vessels. Within minutes, both Kronak cruisers were disabled, their weapons silenced, and their hulls venting atmosphere into space. But success came at a cost. The destroyer Falcon, attempting to close for a final attack run, was caught by return fire from the second cruiser. The enemy energy burst punched through the destroyer's forward armor, causing massive damage to her bow sections and killing dozen crew members instantly. "This is Falcon," Captain Susan Wright transmitted on the emergency frequency. "We've taken critical damage to forward sections. Casualties unknown. We're withdrawing from combat." The loss of the Falcon reduced the human fleet's effective strength just as the Kronak forces were beginning to coordinate their response. Stone watched the tactical display with growing concern as the 3 enemy battleships completed their formation change. In minutes, they would be in position to concentrate their massive firepower against any human vessel within their range. "All ships, this is Admiral Stone. Phase 1 objectives achieved. Enemy bombardment capabilities severely reduced. Initiating Phase 2 of Battle Plan." Phase 2 called for the human fleet to withdraw to longer range and engage in hit-and-run tactics designed to keep the Kronak forces occupied while minimizing their own casualties. It was a strategy that played to human advantages in speed and maneuverability while avoiding direct confrontation with superior Kronak firepower. But as Stone prepared to give the withdrawal order, her communications officer received an urgent transmission from the planet's surface. "Admiral, Defense Coordinator Veltar reports that Kronak ground forces have located one of the civilian evacuation sites. They're requesting immediate orbital support to prevent a massacre." Stone felt her blood turn cold. The canyon complex that Veltar was defending contained nearly 300,000 Zephyrian civilians, refugees who had fled the destroyed cities and were now trapped between Kronak ground forces and the natural barriers that had previously protected them. Estimated time until ground forces reached the evacuation site: 47 minutes, Admiral. Stone closed her eyes for a moment, weighing her options. Providing orbital support would require bringing her ships close to the planet's surface, well within the optimal range of the Kronak battleships. It was exactly the kind of trap that enemy commanders would expect human forces to fall into, letting concern for civilians override tactical judgment. But as she opened her eyes and looked around at her bridge crew, Stone saw the same determination in their faces that she felt in her own heart. They hadn't come this far and fought this hard to abandon civilians at the last moment. "All ships, prepare for close-range planetary support operations. We're going in." The human fleet changed course towards Zephyr Prime's surface, knowing they were flying into the teeth of the most dangerous phase of the battle. Behind them, the 3 Kronak battleships adjusted their own course to intercept their massive guns preparing to deliver firepower that could destroy any human vessel caught in the open. The race was on. Could the human fleet provide the support needed to save 300,000 civilians before the Kronak trap closed around them? The next hour would determine not just the fate of the Zephyrian evacuation, but the survival of humanity's most experienced fleet commanders and their crews. The human fleet descended toward Zephyr Prime like angels of death diving into hell itself. As the 12 warships entered the planet's upper atmosphere, their hulls began to glow with the heat of atmospheric friction, creating brilliant streaks across the alien sky. Below them, 300,000 Zephyrian civilians huddled in the Valkyrie Canyon complex, their crystalline cities reduced to smoking ruins behind them. Admiral Stone watched the tactical display with growing tension as her fleet committed to the most dangerous phase of the battle. Providing close air support to ground forces required bringing her ships within optimal range of the Kronak battleships, exactly where the enemy commanders wanted them. The three massive warships were already adjusting their orbital positions to maximize their firing solutions against the descending human vessels. Atmospheric entry in 90 seconds, announced the navigation officer. All ships report normal entry trajectory. Stone opened a communication channel to Defense Coordinator Veltar on the planet's surface. The Zephyrian military leader had been coordinating civilian evacuation efforts for nearly 2 days, displaying the kind of determined courage that Stone recognized and respected. Coordinator Veltar, this is Admiral Stone. We're beginning our descent. What's the current situation at your location? The response came through heavy static caused by atmospheric interference and Kronak jamming efforts. Admiral Stone, Kronak ground forces have advanced to within 30 kilometers of our position. We estimate 37 minutes until they reach the canyon entrance. Our defensive capabilities are limited. Stone understood the implications. The Zephyrians were a peaceful civilization whose military doctrine emphasized defensive technologies rather than offensive weapons. Their forces were well equipped to protect their crystal cities from orbital bombardment, but they lacked the heavy weapons needed to repel a determined ground assault by Kronak shock troops. Understood, Coordinator. We'll provide fire support to stop the ground assault. Can you mark target locations for orbital strikes? Affirmative, Admiral. Transmitting target coordinates now. As the human fleet entered the planet's atmosphere, the tactical situation became increasingly complex. The approaching Kronak ground forces consisted of approximately 5,000 heavily armed shock troops supported by armored vehicles and artillery units. They were advancing through a series of narrow valleys that led to the canyon complex, using the terrain to protect themselves from orbital bombardment while maintaining pressure on the Zephyrian defenders. Captain Webb aboard the heavy cruiser Defiant studied the target coordinates provided by Veltar's forces. Navigation, bring us to firing position over the Valkyrie Canyon. Weapons Officer, prepare for precision ground support operations. The challenge of providing orbital fire support was significant. The human ships needed to eliminate the advancing Kronak forces without causing collateral damage to the natural formations that protected the refugee civilians. It required a level of precision that pushed human targeting systems to their absolute limits. Target acquisition complete, reported the Defiance weapons officer. I'm reading multiple Kronak formations advancing through valleys designated Alpha, Bravo, and Charlie. Recommend railgun strikes against their heavy equipment, followed by plasma cannon sweeps of infantry formations. Webb nodded grimly. Execute precision strikes. Make every shot count. The Defiant's main batteries opened fire with surgical precision, sending railgun projectiles screaming through the atmosphere at hypervelocity. Each round had been calculated to strike with maximum effect against the advancing Kronak forces while minimizing damage to the surrounding terrain. The results were immediate and devastating. Kronak armored vehicles exploded in brilliant fireballs, while their supporting artillery positions disappeared in clouds of vaporized metal and stone. But success came at a terrible price. As the human fleet concentrated on ground support operations, the three Kronak battleships completed their positioning and opened fire with their main batteries. The massive energy beams lanced through space and atmosphere with the force of miniature stars, each shot carrying enough power to destroy a human cruiser with a direct hit. The destroyer Swift, conducting a close-range attack run against Kronak infantry formations, found herself directly in the path of a battleship energy beam. Captain Rodriguez ordered emergency evasive maneuvers, but physics and geometry were against her. The beam struck the Swift's starboard side with devastating force, tearing through armor plating and causing catastrophic damage to critical systems. "All hands, this is the captain," Rodriguez announced over the ship's communication system as alarms wailed throughout the vessel. "We've taken critical damage. Damage control teams to all affected sections. Engineering, I need power restoration immediately." In the Swift's engine room, Chief Engineer Santos worked frantically to restore power to damaged systems, while emergency lighting cast eerie shadows across the chamber. Half of her engineering team was already dead or wounded, but the survivors worked with desperate efficiency to keep their ship operational. "Captain, main drive is offline," Santos reported. "Backup power holding steady, but we've lost primary life support. Emergency systems will keep us alive for approximately 4 hours." Rodriguez felt her ship shuddering around her as secondary explosions rippled through damaged sections. The Swift was dying, but her crew continued to fight with the stubborn determination that characterized human military forces throughout the galaxy. "Weapons officer, do we still have firing capability?" "Partial capability, Captain. Forward railgun still operational, 2 plasma cannon turrets responsive. Then, we keep fighting. Target that Kronak artillery position at coordinates Delta 7. Meanwhile, Admiral Stone watched in horror as her fleet came under concentrated fire from the 3 battleships. The enemy vessels had positioned themselves to create overlapping fields of fire that turned the space around Zephyr Prime into a killing zone. Any human ship attempting to provide ground support had to run a gauntlet of devastating energy beams that could destroy them with a single hit. "Admiral," her tactical officer reported urgently, "the Swift is critically damaged. The Relentless has taken moderate damage to her port side. The Falcon is completely out of action." Stone felt the weight of command pressing down on her like a physical force. 3 of her ships were already casualties, and the main battle had barely begun. The Kronak battleships were simply too powerful to engage directly, but withdrawing would condemn 300,000 civilians to certain death. "Communications, give me a channel to all ship captains." Stone's voice carried across the fleet with calm authority despite the chaos surrounding them. "All vessels, this is Admiral Stone. The situation is critical, but our mission remains unchanged. We came here to protect civilians, and that's what we're going to do. Adapt your tactics, use every advantage we have, and remember that courage is not the absence of fear, it's action despite fear." Aboard the cruiser Vigilant, Lieutenant Commander Rebecca Stone Jr. listened to her mother's words while studying the tactical situation with professional detachment. Her ship had so far avoided major damage, but the approaching Kronak battleships made her position increasingly precarious. "Weapons officer, target the lead battleship sensor array. If we can blind them, it might reduce their targeting accuracy." "Ma'am, engaging a battleship directly with a cruiser is," her weapons officer began, "is exactly the kind of crazy human tactic that's kept us alive this long," Rebecca finished. "Execute the attack." The Vigilant's quantum torpedo tubes launched their precious ammunition in a carefully coordinated spread, sending 6 of the experimental weapons streaking toward the massive Kronak battleship. The torpedoes used controlled quantum field collapse to bypass conventional shields and armor, representing humanity's most advanced weapons technology. The results exceeded all expectations. The quantum torpedoes struck the battleship's forward section with devastating effect, each weapon creating a brief but intense field distortion that tore through metal and circuitry like paper. The enemy vessel's main sensor array disintegrated in a cascade of secondary explosions, leaving the massive ship partially blind. But the battleship's return fire was immediate and brutal. Energy beams lanced out from its remaining weapon turrets, forcing the Vigilant to execute desperate evasive maneuvers that pushed her drive systems to the breaking point. "Evasive pattern Delta," Rebecca ordered. "All power to engines." On the planet's surface, Defense Coordinator Veltar watched human ships diving through his world's atmosphere like falling stars. trading their lives for his people's survival. The precision of their orbital strikes was remarkable. Kronak ground forces were being systematically eliminated without a single shot falling near the civilian evacuation sites. All evacuation transports. This is Coordination Center. Veltar transmitted to the refugee convoys. Human fleet is providing fire support. Continue evacuation procedures to designated safe zones. The evacuation was proceeding faster than anyone had dared hope. Zephyrian transport vehicles, protected by human orbital fire, were successfully moving civilian populations away from the combat zone toward remote areas where natural formations provided protection from both ground assault and orbital bombardment. But Veltar could see that the human fleet was paying a terrible price for their intervention. Ships that had arrived in perfect formation were now scattered across his world's sky, some trailing smoke and debris from battle damage, others maneuvering desperately to avoid the concentrated fire of the Kronak battleships. Back in space, Captain Webb of the Defiant made a decision that would be remembered throughout galactic history. His ship had taken moderate damage but was still fully operational, and his position near the planet's surface gave him a unique opportunity to strike at the Kronak forces in a way that no other vessel could match. "Helm, plot a ramming course for the damaged battleship," Webb ordered calmly. His bridge crew stared at him in shock. "Sir, a ramming attack," his executive officer began, "will eliminate their command ship and disrupt their entire formation," Webb finished. "We're not going to survive this engagement anyway. Let's make sure our sacrifice counts for something." Webb activated the ship-wide communication system. "All hands, this is Captain Webb. In approximately 3 minutes, we're going to ram the Kronak battleship. All non-essential personnel, report to escape pods immediately. Essential crew, remain at your stations. It's been an honor serving with you all." The response throughout the Defiant was immediate. Nearly half the crew made it to escape pods and successfully launched before the final approach began. But 200 volunteers remained at their stations to ensure that their ship's final attack would succeed. Admiral Stone watched in anguish as the Defiant accelerated toward the damaged Kronak battleship, her hull glowing white-hot from atmospheric friction and engine exhaust. "Marcus, respond," she transmitted on a direct channel. Webb's voice came back calm and resolute. "Admiral, it's been an honor. Take care of my crew." The collision was visible from half the planet's surface. The Defiant struck the Kronak battleship's damaged section with the force of a small meteor, her momentum carrying both vessels into a death spiral that ended in a massive explosion visible from orbit. The destruction of the enemy command ship created a gap in the Kronak formation that the remaining human vessels immediately exploited. But the cost was staggering. The loss of the Defiant and her crew represented nearly 800 human casualties, and 3 other ships were severely damaged. Stone found herself commanding a fleet that was rapidly approaching the limits of its combat effectiveness. "Admiral," her communications officer reported, "Defense Coordinator Veltar signals that civilian evacuation is 94% complete. Estimated time for full evacuation, 47 minutes. 47 minutes. Stone looked around at her damaged bridge, listening to the reports of casualties and equipment failures flooding in from across her fleet. They had fought the Kronak forces to a standstill, but whether they could hold out for another 47 minutes remained an open question. The surviving Kronak vessels were regrouping, their tactical doctrine adapting to the unexpected human resistance. The loss of their flagship had disrupted their command structure, but they still held significant advantages in numbers and firepower. The next phase of the battle would determine whether the human sacrifice had bought enough time for the Zephyrian evacuation to succeed. As Stone prepared her fleet for what might be their final stand, she reflected on the path that had brought them to this moment. Humanity had answered a call for help that everyone else had ignored, fought against impossible odds, and paid a terrible price to protect people they had never met. Whether they lived or died, they had proven something important about the human spirit, that some things were worth fighting for regardless of the cost. The battle for Zephyr Prime was far from over, and the most dangerous moments still lay ahead. The final phase of the Battle of Zephyr Prime began with a moment of perfect silence that stretched across space like a held breath. Admiral Stone stood on the bridge of the Indomitable, watching her tactical display show the devastating price her fleet had paid for their intervention. The destroyer's Swift hung dead in space, her hull venting atmosphere in crystalline streams. The Relentless limped away from the combat zone with massive damage to her drive systems. The Falcon had been completely destroyed, taking her entire crew with her. And yet, somehow, they were winning. The Kronak force that had seemed so overwhelming just hours ago was now reduced to 2 operational battleships and 5 cruisers. Their ground assault had been completely shattered by precision orbital strikes, with over 4,000 Kronak shock troops eliminated and their remaining forces in full retreat. Most importantly, the systematic bombardment of Zephyrian population centers had stopped completely as the surviving enemy vessels focused on the immediate threat posed by the human fleet. Communications, status report from all remaining vessels, Stone ordered. The reports came in quickly, painting a picture of a fleet that had been pushed to its absolute limits, but was still fighting. The cruiser Redemption had taken heavy damage to her forward sections, but retained full weapons capability. The destroyer Hunter was operating on backup power, but could still maneuver and fight. Most remarkably, the cruiser Vigilant remained fully operational despite repeated attacks by enemy battleships. Admiral, her daughter's voice came through the communication system. Vigilant ready for final phase operations. All quantum torpedoes expended, but conventional weapons systems fully operational. Stone felt a surge of pride mixed with terror. Her daughter had proven herself as a combat commander under the most extreme conditions possible, but they were still outnumbered and outgunned by an enemy force that showed no signs of retreating. Admiral Stone, Defense Coordinator Veltar, transmitted from the planet's surface. Civilian evacuation is 98% complete. Final transport convoys will reach safe zones in 23 minutes. Your fleet has accomplished the impossible. 23 minutes. Stone looked around at her bridge crew, seeing the same determination in their faces that had carried them through the entire battle. They were exhausted, bloodied, and operating with damaged equipment, but they had not given up. That stubborn refusal to accept defeat had become humanity's signature trait throughout the galaxy, and it had never been more important than it was now. All ships, this is Admiral Stone, she announced over the fleet communication system. 23 minutes until civilian evacuation is complete. We've come this far together, and we're going to finish this mission together. All vessels, prepare for final engagement. The remaining Kronak forces had indeed regrouped, their 2 battleships moving to concentrate their firepower while their cruiser escorts attempted to envelope the scattered human vessels. It was a classic Hammer Anvil formation designed to trap the human fleet between overwhelming firepower and superior numbers. Captain Rodriguez of the damaged destroyer Swift made a decision that would become legendary throughout human space. Her ship was dying, life support failing, main drive offline, but her weapon systems were still partially operational. From her position near the planet's surface, she had a perfect firing solution on one of the approaching battleships. Engineering, how much power can you give me for one final weapons discharge? She asked her chief engineer. Santos, working in an engine room filled with smoke and emergency lighting, consulted her damaged displays. Captain, I can reroute all remaining power to weapons, but it will completely shut down life support and maneuvering. It's a one-shot deal. Do it. Rodriguez opened a communication channel to her remaining crew members. All hands, this is Captain Rodriguez. We're going to take one final shot at the enemy battleship. After that, abandon ship. It's been an honor serving with you. The Swift's remaining railgun charged with all the power that her dying fusion reactor could provide. The weapon system had been damaged in the earlier battle, but human engineering redundancy meant that it could still function at partial capacity. Rodriguez waited until the enemy battleship was within optimal range, then fired everything her ship had left. The hypervelocity projectile struck the Kronak battleship's main drive section with devastating precision, causing a cascade of explosions that rippled along the massive vessel's hull. The enemy ship lost power and began an uncontrolled tumble that would eventually carry it into the planet's atmosphere. But Rodriguez's gamble cost her ship its final reserves of power. The Swift went dark, her crew abandoning ship in the few functional escape pods that remained operational. Rodriguez herself stayed at her post until the last possible moment, ensuring that her final attack had maximum effect before finally evacuating her dying vessel. Meanwhile, Admiral Stone prepared her remaining ships for what she knew might be their last stand. The human fleet was down to 7 operational vessels facing a Kronak force that still included 1 fully functional battleship and 5 cruisers. The mathematics of space combat were unforgiving. Without a significant tactical advantage, the human fleet faced virtual certain destruction. That advantage came from an unexpected source. Lieutenant Commander Rebecca Stone Jr., analyzing the tactical situation from her position aboard the Vigilant, noticed something that the enemy commanders had apparently missed. The Kronak formation was positioned directly between the human fleet and the planet's second moon, a rocky satellite that possessed significant mineral deposits. Navigation. Can we use the moon's gravity well for a slingshot maneuver? Her navigation officer, Lieutenant Sarah Park, quickly ran the calculations. Affirmative, ma'am. If we approach from the correct angle, we can use the moon's gravity to accelerate beyond our normal maximum velocity. But the timing would have to be perfect. Rebecca opened a communication channel to her mother aboard the Indomitable. Admiral, I have a proposal for the final engagement. Stone listened as her daughter outlined the slingshot maneuver, recognizing the tactical brilliance of using celestial mechanics as a force multiplier. The plan was risky. It required precise timing and perfect coordination among all remaining vessels, but it offered the possibility of achieving the surprise and velocity needed to overcome their numerical disadvantage. All ships, this is Admiral Stone. Execute Formation Charlie 7 for Moon Assist Maneuver. Navigation data is being transmitted now. The surviving human vessels changed course towards Zephyr Prime's second moon, their movements coordinated with the precision that came from months of training together as a fleet unit. The Kronak commanders, observing the human formation change, initially interpreted it as a retreat toward the outer system. Their mistake became apparent only when the human ships swung around the moon's far side and emerged with velocity that exceeded anything the Kronak forces had previously observed. The slingshot maneuver had accelerated the entire human fleet to nearly 15% above their normal maximum speed, giving them both tactical surprise and the momentum needed for a devastating final attack. The coordinated assault was unlike anything seen in galactic warfare for centuries. 7 human warships, moving in perfect formation at impossible velocity, opened fire simultaneously on the remaining Kronak forces. Railgun projectiles and plasma cannon bursts converged on enemy vessels with surgical precision, while the few remaining quantum torpedoes were reserved for the most critical targets. The last Kronak battleship, caught completely off guard by the speed and precision of the human attack, found itself under fire from multiple directions simultaneously. Its massive armor, designed to withstand prolonged bombardment, was not adequate against the concentrated firepower of an entire fleet attacking from optimal range. The battleship's destruction was visible from the planet's surface as a new star briefly appeared in Zephyr Prime's sky. Secondary explosions rippled along the vessel's hull as its fusion reactors lost containment, creating a spectacular light show that marked the end of Kronak resistance in the system. The surviving enemy cruisers, faced with the complete destruction of their fleet's heavy units, made the decision that their commanders should have made hours earlier. They disengaged from combat and fled toward the outer system at maximum velocity, abandoning their ground forces and their mission objectives. Admiral Stone watched the enemy retreat on her tactical display, hardly able to believe that they had somehow survived the most challenging battle in human history. Her fleet was battered, half her ships were damaged beyond immediate repair, and casualty reports were still coming in from across the formation. But they had accomplished their mission. The Zephyrian civilian population was safe. Communications, Signal Defense Coordinator Veltar that Kronak forces have been defeated and evacuation operations can proceed without interference. The response from the planet's surface was immediate and emotional. Admiral Stone, I lack words to express the gratitude of our people. Humanity has proven itself to be everything we hoped the galaxy's defenders would be. As the immediate crisis passed, Stone found herself dealing with the aftermath of the battle. Medical teams throughout the fleet worked frantically to save wounded crew members, while engineering departments assessed damage and began emergency repairs. The human casualties were significant, over 1,500 dead and wounded out of 8,000 personnel, but they had prevented a genocide that would have claimed 2 billion lives. For hours after the battle ended, Stone received a priority communication from Earth that would change the course of galactic history. The message had been transmitted before the battle even began, but the distance between Sol and the Zephyr system meant that it was just now arriving. Admiral Stone, this is Admiral Harrison, Chairman of the Joint Chiefs. The recorded message began. We have received word of your engagement with Kronak forces. Be advised that the Galactic Federation Council has finally authorized military intervention. A Federation fleet of 47 vessels is en route to your position. Estimated arrival time, 18 hours. Stone couldn't help but smile grimly at the irony. The Galactic Federation's massive fleet would arrive to find the crisis already resolved by a dozen human ships and the courage of their crews. The political implications would reverberate through galactic civilization for decades. But the most important message came from an unexpected source. Fleet Marshal Thexon, the same Altarian commander who had refused to authorize immediate Federation response, transmitted a personal communication to Admiral Stone 6 hours after the battle ended. Admiral Stone, his message began, I owe you and your fleet an apology. Altarian military doctrine emphasizes careful planning and overwhelming force applied through proper channels. Your approach was different and far more effective than our methods would have been. The fleet marshal paused, his blue-skinned features showing an expression that Stone had never seen on an Altarian face, genuine respect. The Federation Council has requested a full briefing on human tactical methods. More importantly, they have authorized the expansion of human military forces and granted humanity permanent status on the Galactic Defense Council. Your actions at Zephyr Prime have proven that the galaxy needs defenders who are willing to act when action is required, rather than debate when debate is comfortable. 3 weeks later, Admiral Stone stood in the rebuilt Central Plaza of Zephyr Prime's capital city, watching as 2 billion Zephyrian civilians went about their daily lives in safety. The crystal spires that had been destroyed by Kronak bombardment were already being reconstructed, their geometric beauty enhanced by new defensive systems designed by human engineers. Defense Coordinator Veltar approached her, his crystalline features reflecting the warm light of his world's sun. Admiral, my people have voted to establish a permanent memorial to your fleet's sacrifice. But, more than that, we have requested that humanity establish a permanent military base in our system. Stone nodded thoughtfully. Coordinator, I appreciate the gesture. But I hope you understand that we didn't come here seeking rewards or territorial expansion. We came because people needed help. And that, Veltar replied, is exactly why the galaxy needs more humans in positions of leadership. As Stone prepared to return to Earth, she reflected on the path that had brought humanity to this moment. 50 years ago, humans had been newcomers to galactic civilization, viewed with a mixture of curiosity and condescension. Today, they were recognized as the defenders of galactic civilization's highest ideals, not because they possessed the most advanced technology or the largest fleets, but because they had proven their willingness to fight for others when fighting was necessary. The Battle of Zephyr Prime had changed more than just the fate of one world. It had established humanity as the galaxy's moral conscience, the species that could be counted on to respond when response was needed. Over the following years, human fleets would answer dozens of similar calls, earning a reputation that would endure for centuries. But none of those future battles would carry quite the same significance as the moment when 12 human warships had arrived at Zephyr Prime ahead of the Galactic Federation's bureaucratic response, proving that sometimes the best help doesn't come from the most powerful, it comes from the most determined. The galaxy had called for help, and humanity had answered first. In doing so, they had changed the course of galactic history and established themselves as the defenders of civilization itself. It was a responsibility they would carry with pride for generations to come, inspired by the memory of those who had fought and died to prove that some things were worth any sacrifice. The stars looked down on Zephyr Prime with ancient indifference. But they bore witness to something new, a species that had chosen courage over caution, action over debate, and the welfare of others over their own safety. In a galaxy often ruled by fear and self-interest, humanity had proven that there was still hope for something better, and that hope would spread from star to star, carried by the crews of human warships who understood that the greatest victory was not defeating an enemy, but saving those who could not save themselves.